Look at this delicious, gorgeous looking hot apple dumpling. I tell you what, you want to try something scrumptious? Give this little bird a try and you are going to be amazed. Hello, welcome back to Texas Cooking Today. On this episode of Texas Cooking Today, we're going to make a very humble dish. It has roots that go way, way back. But this humble dish, I've taken it and elevated it a little bit, and we're going to make it a little bit more personal, so it's easier to serve to guests and friends. You're going to love this. So hot apple dumplings. Come a little closer. Let me show you what we're going to make this out of, and I want to show you how to make the very best hot apple dumpling you've ever imagined eating. And if you've never had these, you're in for a real treat. Come over here. You know, when we're making a hot apple dumpling, in the past these things have always been cooked in like a large pan, usually a 13 by 9 or maybe a round casserole dish. And the dumplings have always been placed down there in multiples, and then this wonderful sauce that is created around it while it is baked. But we're not going to quite do it that way. What I want to do is to do this as individual servings, and it makes a really neat and very personal kind of hot apple dumpling. You can use an array of different dishes. This one's a bit small, but it would still work. A bowl like this would be fine. Anything that you could put in the oven and bake with. Now for this one, I have chosen to use these souffle ramekins. I think they have a very elegant appearance to them, especially when they're done with a dish like this. So we're going to use those. Now over here are our ingredients. Get out your pad and get ready to write, because this is very simple. This is 1 cup of flour. You just need a plain all-purpose flour. You don't need bread flour or anything like that. 1/2 of a teaspoon of salt. We're going to need a little bit of milk, and that's going to be not a specific measurement, but generally 3 to, well, usually about 3 tablespoons of milk is needed. Sometimes 2, sometimes 4, but you know, in that general range. You can use some form of fat in this. You're going to have some kind of fat in here. It can be butter. It can be a combination of butter and shortening. You can use lard, like that's what I'm using here. And there's a reason I'm using this. We'll explain that in a bit. And also, I have here an egg, and the white on that is going to be brushed over my pastries right before I bake these. Now, I'm going to be making a syrup, and it's going to be a reduction. I want 100% apple juice. That's what I have back here. Don't get anything that has like preservative in it or other juices. Just 100% plain apple juice. 1/3 of a cup of sugar and 1 teaspoon of lemon juice. I know that sounds weird, but it adds acid that really brings it out. This is 1/3 of a cup of fat. That's what we're going to be using there on the crust. And of course, what the whole dish is about, the simple, humble apple. Now, when I make a pie, I always like to use these Granny Smiths because they're tart. And I love dishes like this that have acidity in them. And that's the way I'm making this one. It's going to be a nice tart dish, which is the reason we've added the lemon juice in here. You don't really taste the lemon flavor, but you get that bright spark from the acid that it has in it, and it really bumps up the flavor in the apples. Now, I'm going to be flavoring the apple with some allspice and cinnamon. I don't have to add sugar to it or anything like that, just the spices. It already has its own natural sugars, and those are more than sufficient. And then I recommend also breaking out some sort of beverage for you to enjoy, whether it is some hot tea, coffee, a soda, something that is alcoholic, like some wine, beer, a nice toddy. Have whatever you'd like, but enjoy something as you enjoy cooking. Let's get right on to making this. I've been doing just a little bit of rearranging here, and what I want to do is to take the fat that I have chosen and put it down in my flour. Now, let me explain to you why I chose to use lard. In the United States, it sounds sort of unusual to use lard in a dish like this. Normally, you would see shortening and maybe butter. But lard? Really? Well, let me tell you something. There's an old baker's secret that is all about lard. If you want the flakiest crust, if you want a crust that is so flaky it's going to impress anybody, because they're going to wonder, gee, how did he get it that flaky? Then you need to be using lard. I mean, honestly, it sounds weird, but the stuff works incredibly well when it comes to making a flaky pastry crust. Now, I've placed my lard in this, and I'm going to place all of this into the refrigerator to chill. This is an important step. You want everything to be nice and cold. You do not want the fat to, or the flour to absorb any of this fat, regardless of which kind you use. So we're going to chill everything down, and I'm going to show you how to break this all in together. Now today I am going to teach you a really neat way of paring, a neat way of holding your knife and removing the peel off of an apple. Now if you notice, I have two different knives out here. One of them that has sort of a curved tip on the blade, and one of them that is a little more straight, even though it's got a slight curve the entire length of it. This is actually the one I want to use because I don't want it to cut too deep into the flesh, and this curve on the end will cause it to cut deeper into the flesh than this knife will. So it's just a choice of different kinds of paring knives, but I like to keep two around, and people wonder why I do that, so I like to go ahead and explain it. Now this method of holding a knife may look a little bit scary, however if it's done properly it is safe. The important thing is keep that sharp edge off of your skin, okay? So what I'm going to do is put the back of the knife right in my hand, and my small finger on the handle here. My other fingers are going to wrap over that blade like so. Now, this is a common method that is used by chefs all over the world. Do not curl your hand closed. You're not trying to make a fist. You're only trying to enclose that blade. Now you see how I pull my fingers back so they're not over the tip of it, but back here the blade is not being touching my skin anywhere. Do not pull the thumb over the blade because then your hand here can get cut, so keep it open. Now with this technique you can simply cut right with the very tip of the knife to remove that skin. Now, let me get this a good start here. And what I want to do is to cut a simple spiral off of my apple. See how I'm keeping my thumb down as a guide? And I'm just using my other hand to rotate this apple, get a little more meat there. And I'm taking off just the skin itself. Just went a little bit deep right there. Not a big deal. So, as you see, very simple method of doing this. Now if you're afraid of doing that, you can choke back on the knife, do it with the heel of the knife, if you have a good sharp one. See there? So here you have a couple of different knifing techniques for paring. Don't be afraid, but always remember, don't pull the thumb in. You're not using the thumb to guide the apple into the knife. You're using it as a guide to keep the knife from moving into different areas that it shouldn't be. You're rotating the apple with your other hand here, your left hand. Move this over a little bit this way. My apologies. Just with a chef's knife, I'm going to slice straight down on this. The first thing we're going to do is use our knife, and very gently, we're going to scoop out the rest of that skin on both ends. Bottom has almost none on it, on that one. Now I'm going to use this simple scoop, just dig in on the flesh and rotate. There we go. I still have a little bit of that core left, and it is not really very nice to get in a hot apple dumpling. There we go. That end, or that half rather, is perfectly now crisp. To flavor our apple, I've got allspice and cinnamon here. Allspice and cinnamon are both very similar in flavor. There we go. Now I have them seasoned and ready to go. Let's move on to our next step. Now our pastry flour and the fat has had plenty of time to chill down. I'm going to go ahead and place this salt inside of this. There we go. And that was 1/2 of a teaspoon of salt. That's 1 cup of flour and 3/4 of a cup of this lard that we're using. I have here some milk, and we're going to use this in just a little bit to cause the gluten to help form up on this. But before I do that, I have to do what's called cutting in. Now I have in my hand what's called a pastry blender. And the whole idea here is to be able to cut through the fat that you're using, like I did right there, and to make these little thin strands. Now you have to sometimes push it right back out. Just go at it, mixing it into the flour. And what I'm looking for is to make little lumps about the size of peas, I should say. You can do this with a fork. A pastry blender is a very simple tool, very inexpensive. It's a good item to add to your kitchen if you don't already have one. And it makes making pastry like this a breeze. Now I do not want to overwork this, but I have just now come down to that sort of pea consistency. And because it has spent a moment out and had a chance to warm up, I'm going to go ahead and put this right back into my refrigerator. I'm going to chill it back down again, and then we're going to go at it for the rest of it. Okay, I have had it in the freezer for just a little bit here, just long enough for it to sit down and get nice and cold. And what I want to do next is to take my milk and 1 tablespoon at a time, just kind of pour that down around in there. Hit it with the pastry blender. Okay, and this is, by the way, very, very cold. And that's an advantage because we do not want to get that fat very hot. We want to keep it cold. And as we keep it cold, it folds in between the layers of the flour better. Does that sound a bit convoluted? Put a little bit of flour on my hands here. I do need to knead it just a little bit though, to disperse the rest of that fat evenly. Here we go. Now what I want to do is to take this little cake I have here, divide it into 2 even parts. There we go. 2 nice simple pastries. Now the reason I'm only using 1 apple on this, I wanted to show you an easy, very simple type of dessert, or you can just serve this as one of your fruits and vegetables for dinner. Not even consider it a dessert. A lot of people do that. Either way, I wanted to show you how to make it in controlled batches. Now, if you choose to do 6 of them this way, or 8, or whatever, go ahead, man, have at it. Just increase the proportions equally. Very good. Now, this is very simple. What I need to do, get myself a knife. I should already have one out. I'm going to take my knife and just cut off some of that excess that I have going on around this. And make a basic little circle here. Does not have to be a perfect circle. Now what I want to do is to take that apple face up. And if you're going to use butter on this, this is the time to go ahead and put a pat right here. And it's a wonderful flavor if you choose to do that. I think you'll absolutely love it. I'm not doing it because, well, I don't need the extra fat in this, especially being that I used that lard in this pastry crust. Now if you'll notice what I'm doing is just kind of gathering it and pinching. That's all you have to do. I'm going to cradle it in my hand to finish pushing the excess to the top. Okay? Now, right here, I can simply take my knife, cut off that excess pastry. I may have cut too much, but I think I can make this work. There we go. I'm just needing to pack this down and form it on the top. And I'm going to push down in that center so it's not just solid pastry in there. form a little bit of an edge on it. So it looks like an apple under there. There we go. Here we are again with our apples. And I have my two ramekins. Now what I want to do is to put some high temperature oil in the very center of my ramekin. This is important because you just simply don't want the base of that apple to stick in there very much. It's probably going to stick a little anyway, but let's not compound problems, right? So all I have there is maybe a quarter of a teaspoon of oil per ramekin, and it's just on the bottom where the center of the apple is. I want to center that apple in that ramekin. Now, let me explain to you the reason I'm not going to cook this with all of that juice inside of it. The idea here is I absolutely love crispy, flaky, kind of crusty pastries. And that's my favorite thing, is to get that beautiful golden brown color on it and for it to just be absolutely stunning, both in its appearance as well as in its flakiness of the crust. And so that's the reason I use the lard, to make it flaky. That's the reason I bake it open like this, so the heat gets underneath it and cooks the bottom of that crust every bit as much as the top. And I have more of that crispy crust going on when I pour my syrup in around it. So it's going to come out as an absolutely heavenly dish. Now remember, we're going to brush the top of these with some egg white, okay? Before we do that, we're going to let that oven heat up a bit. Over here, now I set my oven for 400 degrees. Go ahead and do yours the same way. I have 1.5 cups of this apple juice. Let's pour that in. This is 1/3 of a cup of sugar. I need to get that in there, and we need to stir that until it's fully dissolved. Also, 1 teaspoon of lemon juice. We don't really need much lemon juice. It's only to bump up the acidity of this juice, because the juices that come in bottled form, they're going to be a little bit sweeter, because they don't use Granny Smith apples for those. They use different apples that are much sweeter. And so what I'm doing is I'm putting some of that acid back in them, so that when I pour this around that Granny Smith over there, it's going to have more of that sweet, tart combination, the same way the apple inside has. Well, now it has come up to a nice little boil. So what I want to do is to just reduce my heat to now a medium-low, and let that continue to simmer off just like that. We're producing good steam, and that's what we want. It's just going to reduce the liquid to a much more concentrated form and make this a wonderful apple syrup. Let's go ahead and prepare our egg. What we're going to do is to go with the old-fashioned method, which is crack an egg, keep one end straight up, just like that. Pour out the other shell. Now pour it to the other side. There we go. And right there, I have a yolk and my whites. They're separated out just perfect. There's no mess, no fuss. I have now 5 minutes left before I place these in this hot oven. So I'm going to take this egg white, gently brush it over the top of this. Now on this apple cider that I'm making here, that's what it is right now. It's a seasoned, sweetened cider. Still got it bubbling away. Just give it a little spin every once in a while to stir it. That's all it really requires. Okay, it's time to get these down in our oven. At 400 degrees. We're going to bake those off until they're nice golden brown on top, and that'll really depend on your elevation. But here, that's probably going to be in the neighborhood of about 30 minutes. Our syrup here has been coming up on about 30 minutes. Now if you'll notice how much it has reduced at this point, I'm going to pull out just a little bit. I just need to coat the spoon, no more. I need to taste this. Remember, it will be hot, be careful. The flavors in that are really good. It has the right acidity. I'm going to add just a few grains of salt to this. While that may seem a little bit weird, what that's going to do is it's going to bring out some serious flavor. And when I said a few grains, I mean maybe I sprinkled in 25 or 30 grains there. It's not even enough to measure. Just a very light single finger pinch. Now, give this a little bit more time. because right now it looks like it's down to about a cup of volume, and I wanted that at about 3/4 of a cup. What a beautiful, beautiful sauce. Well, I think I have reduced this enough now. I've just turned off that heat. We're going to get this to cool down a bit to stop foaming. But that's a good sign right there. These have just now come out of the oven. Look at that beautiful golden brown crust that's on this. Beautiful and flaky. And the best part is I know this crust is flaky. I've used it many times, but wait till you guys try it. When you do a crust this way, it is fantastic. Now, very simply, what I want to do is just stir that liquid a little bit just to get it mixed real well. Make sure that any settled spices are pulled up into it. And I can pour it straight down into the center of this, over the top a little bit, or just straight into the ramekin below. Well, there we have it. A beautiful, heavenly treat. This is sort of like a hot apple pie that's ramped up. Steroids. Goodness me. Very hot. Super delicious. A very flaky crust, bottom and top. That's the way to go. Well, I could eat like that every day. That is just flat delicious. I think I got a little on my chin. Well, I'll tell you what, give this one a try. The elegance of serving it this way, it just looks beautiful for your guests. It is also a little bit simpler in its preparation. And the way it comes out in texture, it's just unbelievable. You're going to love your hot apple dumpling done this way. Give this one a shot, and thank you. Thank you very much for watching Texas Cooking today. To my subscribers, thank you very much. And if you haven't subscribed, well, please do. It's a good show. You have a good day. Thank you for watching Texas Cooking Today, the show where you can get great recipes and the best techniques are taught. Please subscribe to Texas Cooking Today, where you will always find something hot and ready to eat.